This video is sponsored by Mark 7, shaping the future of all things car wash. Visit mark7.net for more information.
Welcome back to Unscripted, carwash.com's video interview series that connects you with market leaders. Joining me today on Unscripted is Scott Campbell, Global Product Manager for Hydro Systems. Scott, it's great to see you, and thanks for doing this interview with me today.
Oh, great to see you too as well, and thank you for the time today to talk about car washes.
Absolutely, one of my favorite topics for sure. So, Scott, you recently wrote an article, as you know, for Professional Car Washing and Detailing magazine's October 2021 issue. And as I often do in this unscripted video series, I like to catch up with some of the authors in our magazine to follow up on the topics that they write about. The topic you wrote about was on special considerations for ultra-concentrated chemical dispensing in bay car wash format. So first logical question for you, Scott, is what are some of the special considerations, if any, in regard to chemical delivery and application for in-bay automatic and self-serve car washes, and how do they differ from tunnel car washes?
Yeah, that's a great question. To start it off, you have to look at what are the basic technologies that are there for chemical dilution in car wash. And there are four basic chemical dilution systems. Number one, it's low pressure venturi. This is also known as float valve technology, where in the back of the car wash room, you happen to have these big vessels where water and chemical are mixed together and held. And basically you take water that's at normal pressure coming in from the street, 40 to 50 psi, taking chemical, mixing with that. That's very common that you would see in both in-bay and self-serve. The second technology is water-driven pumps. Take up a lot less room than the low-pressure venturi, but you see those quite often as well in-bay and self-serve. The third different type of technology is high-pressure venturi injection. It's a little bit more common in terms of tunnel washes, but you would see that a little bit in in-bay and self-serve. And the fourth technology is basically solenoid, or also known as metering chemical technology as well. But of those four technologies, you primarily see both the water-driven pumps and low-pressure venturi primarily in the in-bay and self-service applications. And the reason why those two technologies are pretty common, when you look at the pain points of the customers that use those type of car washes, number one, the amount of usage comes into play on both WDPs, water-driven pumps, as well as low-pressure venturi. They don't require a lot of maintenance associated with those. So if you're not on site and you have to make sure that you have a product that can do not only the accuracy for chemical dilution, but also make sure that your equipment stays up and running, the water-driven pumps, low-pressure venturi will go for months, if not years, without any type of maintenance. And so the number of cycles between schedules for maintenance are very low for those two types of applications for chemical dilution. Two, when it comes to the type of chemicals, as we know, in bay as well as self-serve, you never know which type of chemicals you're going to use. Could be basic, could be acidic, depending on the time of year. And so those two type of technologies, WDPs and low pressure venturi, they're pretty well, if the products are designed correctly, they're pretty well inert when it comes to those different type of chemicals. So you don't have to worry about your equipment falling flat in terms of their capabilities. So you can basically put those chemical dilution items in play, and they'll go for a very long time before the need for any type of maintenance. And then finally, when it comes to in-bay as well as self-service, you don't necessarily have a lot of room to play with. And so the footprint, especially the water-driven pump, comes into play where you don't have to have that big, huge holding tank for chemical and water mixtures. And so if you really are hard up for space, water-driven pumps is the right solution for you. But going back to the original question, which type of technologies are probably going to be recommended for those in-bay and self-service applications is primarily going to be low pressure venturi and WDPs.
All right, certainly makes sense for sure. So when looking at the chemicals themselves, Scott, what would you consider to be an ultra concentrated product? And why do ultra concentrated products require special dispensing needs over, let's say, traditional products in these bay formats?
Yeah. So good question. So ultra concentrated products, so we're seeing a lot more of those in use in car washes. And it comes down to the fact that shipping chemical plus water in an already diluted format together, it doesn't make a lot of sense because car washes, they have access to water already. So having chemical plus water delivered to you is kind of redundant and you have to pay a lot for the freight. And so what chemical manufacturers have done is they've taken out a lot of the water from the already mixed chemicals. And basically, instead of having dilutions that you need to reach, in the past, it's been like 1 to 50, 1 to 100, 1 to 200. Now what we're seeing is ultra concentrates. By definition, they're probably anything leaner from a concentration standpoint of 1 to 1,000, but we're also seeing 1 to 1,500. 1 to 2,000, obviously the ratio being chemical to water. And the ultra concentrates, not only are you decreasing your freight costs by going to those, but also the package size decreases too. So instead of having to move around a 55-gallon drum of chemical, now you can just pick up a tote that's 5 gallons in size and move that from point A to point B on your car wash site. So today, a lot of the equipment's not designed for ultra concentrates because of the traditional accurate dilutions that you have to reach, which are, as I said earlier, 1 to 50, 1 to 100, 1 to 200. Since you have to be able to get leaner now, you have to go with a total different approach when it comes to treating with ultra concentrates. And the big thing that you have to keep in mind to work with ultra concentrates is that you have to be able to utilize not metering tips, which is the traditional way in Venturi equipment to be able to get lean. But now there's a technology called ultra lean dilution discs, which provides a higher, bigger throughput. So you decrease the chance for any type of dirt to get caught in there. But also you have a circuitous path in order to be able to have the chemical go through the discs and be able to reach those dilutions that you need. So whether it's low pressure Venturi or high pressure injectors, these ULDs are becoming more and more common. And as a result, you not only decrease the chance for clogging, as I said earlier, but because of the fact that you have this long path that the chemical goes through, it allows you to have a lot leaner chemical dilutions as a result of that.
Definitely trying to monitor. Maybe a topic for a future article. For sure, Scott. In addition to all, transporting and maneuvering, it's also saves space in the storage room, which I know is a critical issue for some operators out there. So, Scott, what are some of the top reasons that dilutions and pressure and proper application might fluctuate? And how do operators avoid these variables that really may cause wash inconsistencies?
Yes. Now, in terms of what wreaks havoc on the dilutions of chemicals when you're in a car wash environment, it's water pressure changes that really create havoc. And water pressure changes during the course of the day. Most car washes use a public water source. And as everybody knows, the water pressure changes during the course of the day just based on usage. And so if you have a car wash, you have a subdivision of houses that's near your car wash. When it's 6 o'clock p.m., when everybody's making dinner, the water pressure decreases because everybody needs water at that same time. And as the water pressure changes, some chemical dilution equipment performance changes as well. So what you really want to do is find the equipment that when that water pressure changes, it basically acknowledges that the water pressure changes, but keeps water pressure static. And some of the things you have to look for in equipment is that ability to do that. It's all about being able to sense that water pressure change and be able to keep water pressure. The chemical equipment itself sees even. And so when it comes to like Venturi-based equipment, so whether it's in injectors or adductors, there are quite a few different manufacturers that offer this ability to equal out the water pressure as the water pressure changes. And as everybody knows, if you happen to have a water pressure changes and your chemical dilution changes too, over diluting chemical is a problem because you're wasting chemical as a car wash operator. If you're under diluting, you're obviously not getting your car very clean. So the car has to go through the cycle again to be cleaned, usually at the expense of the car wash operator. So being able to get chemical dilution accuracy is so important, but being able to monitor the water pressure is important as well. Now, when it comes to water-driven pumps, which is one of the different chemical technologies I talked about earlier, water-driven pumps are proportional in nature. So as the water flow and water pressure decrease or increase, the amount of chemical that it sees increases and decreases as appropriate. So basically, that's the type of technology that is good to have in a car wash environment, because if you do anticipate to see water pressure fluctuations or even flow rate fluctuations, the amount of chemical that goes into that pump will change accordingly.
All right, now I know your company Hydro Systems has been working with car washes for quite some time, over 3 decades now, right? So what emerging mixing, dispensing, and delivery technologies are manufacturers such as yours working on to enhance the effectiveness and the application of these ultra concentrated products?
Yeah, so when we talk about pain points, Hydro Systems has spent a lot of time and effort going into the marketplace, talking to end users about the pain points. And the main pain points that we see, we just talked about those water pressure fluctuations and the impact that those have on performance of equipment, but also too, the clogged chemical dilution equipment is a big problem too. A lot of the chemistries might happen to have some impurities in them. There's some dirt that could potentially get into the systems too, and clogged tips are a big problem. 3, the aggressive chemicals hurting systems is definitely out there too, because a lot of the traditional equipment, you either have to design them for acids or design them for bases. Some of the equipment can't be used with both, and so that's a pain point. Equipment downtime, obviously that's a big one too, where if you're a car wash operator and you can't keep your car wash up and running, having downtime is a big money loss for you. And finally, what we're hearing too is equipment that can actually talk to the operator is very, very important. So if you happen to have a piece of equipment that needs maintenance, talking from the piece of equipment to the operator is extremely important, so they know when to service it, so you don't happen to have that downtime. But when it comes to the ultra concentrates, those 5 pain points I just talked about become that much more exemplified. And so all these equipment manufacturers are having to scramble to be able to not only handle the ultra concentrates and offer the ultra lean dilution discs to go along with their venture equipment, but also take into consideration those 5 pain points too. So the big things in terms of what the manufacturers are concentrating on: number 1, technologies that can hold chemical dilutions constant regardless of the water pressure changes. 2, handling hyperconcentrates, but more than just that is that since hyperconcentrates are rotated around during the different seasons of the year, different chemistries are used. One day it might be 1 to 1,000, next day it might be 1 to 2,000. Having the equipment that could be versatile enough to switch on a dime to be able to go to a different concentration is very, very important. Since some of these hyperconcentrates have different chemical chemistries associated with them, making sure that your equipment can handle the different chemistries is so important as well, because what you don't want to do is spend hundreds of dollars, either tens of thousands of dollars on equipment, and then one day it's working fine, the next day it's not because something attacked your seals inside your chemical dilution equipment, making it to where your equipment is redundant or is no longer functional. And you have as an owner, you have to buy new equipment, so it's really bad. But again, the period between maintenance is so important, where obviously every equipment that you buy that's chemical dilution in nature has to have some type of proactive maintenance associated with that. The increase in time between the maintenance is so important that if you can extend that, but still have the peace of mind that's going to work is so important. With ultra concentrates, it makes things a little bit more complicated to be able to do that. But that's what manufacturers of chemical dilution equipment, since we're the experts, we keep working at time and time again, is to up the time where equipment can be used without any type of maintenance needed on it, and decrease the amount of time that is not, or decrease the time in which the equipment's down, basically.
Always want to avoid that equipment downtime for sure, for a lot of reasons. So we'll keep our eye on these developments here, Scott. For viewers out there who are interested, that's the October issue where we featured Scott's article on this topic here. So again, thank you for writing that article for our magazine, Scott, and thanks for doing this interview with carwash.com today.
Hey, thank you, Rich, very much for the time today.
This video is sponsored by Mark 7, shaping the future of all things car wash. Visit mark7.net for more information.